a most unusual one. What Mr. Scamander fears more than anything else in the world is...
having to work in an office, sir.
Go ahead, Newt.
Ridiculous.
I loved going back to Hogwarts, of course I did.
When I opened the script for Beast 2, and I just saw Hogwarts, I was really thrilled. When I walked on and saw all the trunks and Hogwarts stickers and things like that, it's pretty amazing.
And then to have all the kids in their Hogwarts uniforms from the 1927 period was really great. And Jo came to visit and she was like, wow, you know, we're back in Hogwarts.
I think it expands the universe and brings it in some ways back closer to the Harry Potter world, which is great.
It was slightly odd out-of-body experience because I've watched with everyone else those classes, and suddenly to be in it, you're in there doing it, but then you look back as yourself and realise how special it was.
Hogwarts doesn't need to change a lot. That's the thing about magic. You don't need the latest wand. Their tools have remained the same for hundreds of years. So Hogwarts looks very familiar to anyone who saw the Potter movies. But obviously the teaching style looked different.
Professor McGonagall! The stranger's done it again! Missy, it's the stranger!
She's horrible, she did this, she did that, she did... Whoops,
I did nothing wrong!
Those names, the stories, the histories that sit in the back of our mind from the Potter series begin to weave their way into Beasts.
Coming back was an interesting one. Never thought we'd be using Hogwarts again when we finished on Deathly Hallows Parts 2. And of course, Deathly Hallows Parts 2, we completely trashed the school.
With Hogwarts, they built the whole castle digitally for the last film. It had been a model for the previous 7, but for the last film, because there was so much destruction, it was a digital build. So Tim went to dig it out of the archive.
Everything had to be upgraded. Everything had to be brought up to a higher resolution throughout Potter to hold up in this sort of new super resolution that we're all working in these days.
You want to keep the connection with what people know and love.
The unique thing was we had to create the Great Hall, and we knew that that wasn't going to be a physical build because it was one shot, so it was a digital build. What we were able to do was go in at midnight into the Warner's Harry Potter tour next door to the studio and scan the set. And I think it was somebody in the office who pointed out at the tour the gaps between the tiles are bigger and it's clean, as in all the Potter films it was dirty and dusty. So once we'd built it correctly, we then realised, oh no, it has to look slightly different than that, so we went back in and used all the films as reference.
You do get into one little nook of Hogwarts that you never saw before.
The stage direction, you describe it as a cupboard. Well, it's quite a generous cupboard, and it's where Newt begins to be interested in and collecting creatures. Compared with his later adventures, they're quite modest creatures, but it's a little secret place where he does exactly that.
What I love about Newt is he's true to himself. He is so full-hearted and passionate and brilliant, but it doesn't make him easy.
Do we know where we are? Do we know what classroom we're in? Do we recognise it? Yeah? Okay.
We're reconstructing the dark arts classroom.
On the last one, when we put all the set pieces away, unfortunately, we didn't have enough storage area, and the classroom, unfortunately, fell apart. It was the one set I couldn't save. The rest we saved. But that was a real pleasure to rebuild that, actually. We had the original drawings, we worked to the original spec, so we copied the original classroom.
And I'm up there, and then I go bonk like that, and that'd be...
To actually be there with a young Dumbledore, I mean, because all the people who occupied that room throughout the Harry Potter films had their own impact. The set decorator Stephanie McMillan and Stuart would give them their own elements. So Mad-Eye Moody had all these kind of lenses and eyeballs that could look, and you know, he was really kind of like paranoid, if you like. So whoever had it had their own influence.
To the back, Neville. Everyone form a line.
So we had to do a new version for young Dumbledore. So he's into his astronomy. So Pierre built this amazing telescope, it's huge telescope, 15 foot high. So it's kind of a nod to, you know, where he's going. There's a telescope in his office.
and also retrieved some original pieces that were used in his office to populate his classroom. So this is just a couple of samples of some elements that are on his desk.
When you're in a classroom with the detail and the props, and even when you look out of a window, the backdrop, you know, the painted backdrop of what's to be seen through a window is there. It makes that little leap of the imagination for an actor very easy. The children in that scene were so thrilled to be there, and David constructed that scene. He gives the actors so much time to discover what they need to discover to make a scene their own and to feel natural and real. So it really felt like a class.
Oh, that's good, that's good. So we really need to sort of vocalise it a little bit. I want it to be as real as possible for me as it is for them. So it's always encouraging actors to be in the moment. And there's a lot of laughter and playfulness in each scene.
There they were, wide-eyed, thrilled to be, you know, in this familiar surrounding, the Defence Against the Dark Arts classroom. It's another chapter. There are wonderful little seeds planted of threads and characters that appeared in the Potter films. It really hints at more to come.
In the first movie, Newt has his case full of creatures.
You know, I loved the case so much. We had this idea that he had lived in his case for that year when he was collating the information for Fantastic Beasts.
In this movie, we get to see how he actually lives in London. Newt's home life is, to me, so endearing. I love Newt's house. It's kind of bare and boring.
The ground floor is very much a show home. It's not really where his world is. It's only when you go down this sort of Escher staircase and you find this absolutely mind-boggling menagerie, a hospital for creatures. You see the guy's character.
Bunty, the little ones are loose again.
Newt is keeping, highly illegally, a whole array of magical creatures safe in his enchanted basement.
One of the things that David and Joe and Stuart and I discussed was, does Newt sleep in his apartment? And that didn't make sense to me. He's a man that's much more at home, travelling through the jungle or out in the field.
Newt's the maverick. He goes out and deals with beasts and protects beasts.
And I felt now that he would still go and live down in his hammock down in the basement.
It's such a great metaphor for Newt. On the surface, so unassuming, and deep down, so fascinating and strange and deep.
Why do strange creatures love you so much?
Well, there are no strange creatures,
Only blinkered people.
Bunty!
We had this beautiful environment. It's a classic example of Newt has taken his townhouse in London and he's applied some magic and made it into the slightly exaggerated version of a Georgian basement. But it's still got that architecture, the arches, the bricks have all been worked out. We've done all that exactly as it would be, but we've just made it huge. And for me, the stairs remind me slightly of the moving stairs in Harry Potter, so there's a slight nod to that.
Really an animal hospital, but a remarkable animal hospital, because as he did in his case, he recreates the habitats for each of the creatures to make sure they're at home.
With the help of visual effects in places, it's kind of infinite. There are landscapes and habitats in there for the creatures that just go on and on.
We did do some proper research for that set. We went to London Zoo and looked around their veterinary department. And so a lot of that is transposing those very ordinary modern ideas. We did make a lot of his equipment in there. A lot of it was very much as they would do in the zoo today, you know, bits of string and pipe and cardboard, things they do to improvise medical equipment for animals. And we also had a great big operating light based on a 1950s-60s operating light, but we add things to it. And that's what's so much fun, actually, adding period detail into something that's a different era.
Bunty, Bunty, the baby nifflers are loose again.
I am Newt's assistant, and she's called Bunty. Lovely name.
What was wonderful was when I read about Bunty in the film, I said to David, I was wondering what the backstory is with Bunty. And within about 3 days, Joe had written this extraordinary 2-page short story on who Bunty and Newt were.
I particularly love the character of Bunty. Bunty is Newt's faithful assistant who came to him through his writing. She understood his mission.
They met at Newt's book signing about 5 months ago when Fantastic Beasts came out.
And has come to help him with the animals. So she's like a magical veterinary assistant.
She's a little bit of a geek who's been admiring him from afar. A really big fan of his work, his book, and she's on the payroll, so she's looking after the animals in the illegal basement.
Which is great, because you obviously worry about all the creatures when he's off on his adventures, you know. She's there looking after them.
Fed nearly everyone. And completely besotted with him.
As is quite clear in the movie, she's secretly and hopelessly in love with a completely oblivious Newt.
Perhaps you should take off your shirt.
I'll dry off quick enough.
But they have a wonderful friendship, and Newt cares for Bunty.
She's just fabulous. I love her as a character.
One of my favourite things about the new Fantastic Beasts film is you get to meet a few new creatures.
Where there is an existing creature in mythology, it just adds so much texture and colour, particularly when you're moving around the world, because I'm fascinated by the differences in mythologies and creatures. My favourite creature down in Newt's basement is the Kelpie.
I have one particular creature who is an underwater beast.
The Kelpie is a mythical Scottish beast that lives in lochs. The inspiration really came from the name, and so we designed something initially based on kelp. Wouldn't it be great if this equine sort of creature was made out of kelp? It was at times unrecognisable underwater because it would just look like a field of kelp, and then it creates more of a horse-like shape when it breaks the surface.
It's a semi-spectral horse in mythology, and the horse would stand in a pond or a river, and people would go to take the horse, and it would dive and drown you the moment you got on its back. And the only way to tame it is to get a bridle on it, which is very difficult. So we watch Newt taming the Kelpie.
So I've been learning to dive, to do like sort of deep sea diving.
You bite Bunty again, and there'll be trouble, mister.
Today, he has to wrestle with this Kelpie, and so he dives into the water, and then I get soaked. And the first time I put my hand... So I had to do it a few times so I didn't react so much. And so I've just spent the last 2 hours drenched.
The Niffler's back, Pickett's back. It's been brilliant to be part of creating those originally, and now we get to do them again and trying to do everything better, obviously.
You see a couple of the old favourites from his case.
I keep a Niffler. Get looking. Oi, get looking.
So there's not only one scene stealer, there's now an entire family of scene stealers.
The Niffler was far away everyone's favourite creature in the first movie. And everyone kept saying to me afterwards, I want a Niffler, I wish I had a Niffler. And think this through. You don't want a Niffler, but, you know, they saw only the cuteness and maybe didn't appreciate the full destructiveness of this creature.
I think one of my most enjoyable scenes has been trying to wrangle the fleet of little babies.
The actors are very involved in what we're doing. They're watching previews as we're developing it, and they're giving us their character beats, and they're giving us ideas for what creatures would do. Eddie's so familiar with his Nifflers.
Coming in, see Niffler grab that goes there, capture that into the pocket.
He's saying, yeah, but I think I would do this with a Niffler, and a Niffler would behave like this. So it's great. It's a real collaboration.
Thoughts?
He doesn't hold back. If he's going to touch the head of a creature, if he's going to stroke it or interact with it, you need to be ready to take his full weight.
Working with CGI beasts is hilarious. It's totally bizarre. It's as weird and odd as you would imagine it to be. Sometimes you're working with actually nothing. So if you'll Pickett, for example, you just imagine him there. And then sometimes you have these amazing puppeteers doing extraordinary things. Sometimes you have men in full body green suits looking ridiculous, and you're trying to pretend that they are some wondrous, fantastical creature. And sometimes you're looking at a cross on a stick. And what it does is it makes you get home every night feeling really tired because your imagination has been squished from every side. But I love it.
Hold on, one second, I'll get my coat.
This circus is not a place of great wonder and mystery. It's a combination of freak show and monsters. It's a brutal place. We're touching on themes that are very close to my heart. This is an aspect of the magical world that I never really explored in Potter, even though I knew it was there.
The circus stuff, and I quite enjoy that research, trying to create some animals that look like they haven't necessarily been cared for the best, and you've got to feel for them, they've got to have that heart, and it's quite nice to be able to try and create that.
Well, that'll be the zoo.
There's a Chinese bestiary that is utterly fascinating. The Zulu is described in Chinese mythology as a gigantic elephant-sized cat, 5-colored, and the Zulu is very fond of newt, but to anyone else, absolutely horrific.
The zoo has had a lot of iterations. It's really developed. It's been one of those creatures who's taken a while to get right, for everyone to be happy. And that's where everyone has David Heyman, David Yates, Joe, everyone that comes in has an opinion because they're such important creatures, and, making it Chinese, making it cat-like. But if you read the descriptions in Fantastic Beasts, the actual book, you'd be plonking bits of animal together, and that's okay, but, you kind of want to give it its own heritage, if you like, its own being. So you've got to look elsewhere as well. And it's tough. It's really tough because the natural world is so amazing. It's hard to come up with original, new, fully functioning, believable creatures.
It was insane for the circus to think that they could exhibit a Zulu without trouble, but they are a little arrogant. And what happens is predictably awful. You don't want something like that loose on the streets. Even in the first movie, you haven't unleashed anything quite that terrifying anywhere. It really does take a newt scamander to contain and look after that beast. Credence has managed to hide in the circus, and no one asks too many questions.
The circus is a reflectively abusive environment to the one he just broke out of, not with full intention. The obscurus broke him out violently. Credence, who has truly had nothing to live for except to know who he is, also realizes he had, at least almost, something to live for in his companion.
When we first meet Credence, he has formed a powerful emotional connection for the first time in his life with someone who's very like him in certain ways.
Nagini is a prisoner in this place, and there's another layer to it because she's bound to become a prisoner in her own body.
She's a maledictus. That means someone who carries a blood curse. They appear to be like an animagus, which is something in the wizarding world, which means someone can change at will and transform back into the creature with which they have the most affinity, I would say. But a maledictus is something very different. Slowly, over time, they are turning into a creature, and they can't stop it. They can't turn back. They will become a beast. With everything that implies, they will lose themselves. They'll be alive, but in beast form, whereas an animagus retains their human brain.
Every time she turns into a snake, it takes her one step further to being fully that creature for the rest of her life.
Claudia Kim is a very elegant young woman, and I did a dress for her that I found this lace and screened over with metallic foil to get the idea of a snake skin without literally using a snake skin for visual effects. And then I did ruffles that went around the bottom and the sleeves to kind of depict potentially the coils of a snake.
These movies have given me the chance to tell a story that I knew all along about Nagini, who appears only as a snake in Potter.
Nagini was always once a woman in her mind, which is so deeply disturbing.
Now, there were always hints that she had been human in her name, because the Naga are, in mythology, a race of snake beings. So the name was an allusion to the fact that she may herself once have been human.
What I'm really intrigued about is where Joe takes Nagini next. So I filmed the end, and we filmed the beginning. I want to know what happens in the middle.
I never wanted to give this enormous dollop of backstory, but now I can tell it, which is very satisfying and fits perfectly into the theme of this movie. For Credence, his big question is, who am I? We know he's very, very powerful to have survived this condition so long.
He's now setting out on a journey of self-discovery to understand his own point of origin, and this is the transformation. I want to know who I am. Grindelwald holds the knowledge.
This is where you will find proof of your true identity.
This person is a victim to violence and ultimately being so easily manipulated. That's the tragedy.
It had to be Paris. Of course it had to be Paris.
J.K. Rowling never disappoints. She's done her own research in and around Paris. It's very, very specific.
It's a great pleasure to work with her because she's incredibly collaborative. She sort of really appreciates that together, I and this wonderful group of people ultimately are bringing her work to the screen.
You give Stuart one line of description and bang, he gives you a world.
For a designer, of course, that's the best bit of receiving the script, worrying yourself to death initially, and then working out how you're going to do it and slowly putting it together with the help of research and some very skilled artists.
It's this amazing combination of artistry and logistics, and the delivery of those concepts into a sort of hard-standing set out on the back lot, and the amount of time that they deliver those worlds in. They built the world for me, all in a car park in Watford. Paris of the 20s was a real melting pot of ideas, creatively, artistically, socially.
Everyone thinks, wow, Paris, why are we shooting there? It's like a museum. Those buildings are the same buildings, they've been there for hundreds of years, but the reality is those buildings have all been cleaned. They've been jet washed since the 70s and 80s. And then the ground floor is all very modern and the street furniture's changed. To get that authenticity, you need to have control.
Well, Paris is a little bit different to the Paris we know today. It's a little grayer, but it's still gorgeous, beautiful Paris with its wide boulevards, but also its little secret alleyways. It's magical in its own way.
Stuart went out to Paris, had a nice, walk around, sort of absorbed a bit of Paris into his mind, and then pretty much designed the whole set from scratch.
We photographed things we liked, apartment blocks we liked, shops that we liked, and we made a kind of collage of these images. In building this big complex set, we placed these elements that we liked very close together. There are no sort of dull bits in between, as it were. Everything design-wise is significant and interesting. There are 30, 40 people upstairs working in the art department with me who draw using CAD programs. I'm the kind of dinosaur with a wooden pencil.
He's got a lovely team. The art department are always my favourite department because whenever you go up there, one, they've got all these cool things everywhere on the walls and we can discuss pictures and models of things and you can move things around.
Physical models in white card have proven to be the ideal way to present a set to David Yates. They're not very atmospheric made in white card, they're very sort of sterile looking, but they represent the exact space. Entrances, exits, windows, great interest to the cameraman and the director.
Not only does he come up with this amazing world that he builds, first in concepts and models, but then he delivers it. He actually builds it.
We started on the movie in September last year, and we began shooting it in June. this year. So that's 8-9 months from the beginning, the very first drawings. We had 16 weeks planned as the building time, and we, various reasons, had less than that. It's a pretty ambitious set for 16 weeks of building, and even more ambitious for about 14 weeks is probably what we had.
You get a script, and then from that script we work out how many sets there are. And once we've got that set, Stuart will then sit down and he'll just do a little sketch, and we'll work our way back from that. I will then go off, instruct all the HODs of the various departments to do a sample board. We get a big menu for each of the sets all laid out for us, and Stuart will then work his way through that, choosing each of the different textures and paints as we go through all of the sets. And then from there, I will then bring in the crew, which will be carpenters, plasterers, the stagehands, the riggers, painters, and then we start working our way through this big list of sets that we have to build in a very short period of time and keep it on budget. Time is the biggest enemy, and our weather as well. Even in the summer, we can't guarantee having a sunny day.
Some people would say that I tend to build big. It is true, but traditionally, sets on studio backlots are compressed. Backlot isn't that big, the budget isn't that big. We've been at pains here on this movie not to do that, for the streets to be real width, sidewalks, the real width. And I think it's a huge part of the credibility of this place.
The Art Nouveau period obviously was really particularly strong in Paris and France in the 20s, so we were able to kind of harness that in a lot of the designs that we did for the film, from posters to street signage and props.
The interesting thing about working to a period is there's almost a set of stylistic rules, a set of rules about how things were manufactured in the time period. It's almost liberating. It gives you a little set of rules for the prop makers to really work with and interpret and riff off, really. Obviously on a film like The Potters or Fantastic Beasts, there's an element that you can't find, that you can't hire, that you can't buy, that has to be made. And that's really where we come in. We contribute to the making of the world in that way.
We did shop in lots of French markets. We went to an amazing number of trade markets in the Paris area. We went to Le Mans, to Chartres, Chateau, all these big fairs, and we just bought, and we had to think, oh, I could use that, and I could paint that, or maybe that could work, and we've used everything. It's been incredible.
The films are becoming bigger and bigger, so... Yeah,
so where you've got a shop, it will be full of product, which has to have labels and price tags and branding and point of sale and advertisements on the side of buildings, so it snowballs. We try and immerse ourselves a little bit in the details that no one else is particularly interested in. It's kind of our little indulgence, if you like. So that's anything from typography, advertising, illustrations, printing techniques, and how things would have been actually manufactured.
Yeah.
And all those things all go into the palette of how we would then work. For example, a lot of our typography is actually scanned typefaces from the period, so they really are anchored in that time. But of course, that period was just absolutely florid with illustration. Any poster you see from the period for an advertisement or the sideshows in the circus or the theatre, artists were painting and illustrating to some length to get a beautiful piece of art. So that's quite a challenge.
Yeah, it was such a big thing that even the artists were able to sign the posters.
We are in the Muggle world, which is a gift to a designer because it's such
an amazing, beautiful period. But it's much more fun when you are in the magical world.
Appare Fastidium.
Place Cachet is a square in Paris. It has two separate characters, really. It is what it appears to be at first glance, just another part of Paris, a regular part. But it's also transformed into the magical world.
The Place Cachet is the square, and as anyone who knows French will know, the name means hidden square. You walk through a statue and bang, you're into magical Paris.
It's like he's taken the spirit of Paris in that era and then the spirit of the wizarding world and married them in such a natural way.
Stuart particularly felt it was important to pay homage to Diagon Alley, to have that connection.
It is a full-on Diagon Alley, but in Parisian buildings.
Anna Pinnock and her team did an amazing job completely refilling all the shops with wizarding merchandise.
As you'll see from the set dressing in the windows, cauldrons and Quidditch.
Wands, carriages, dressing for streets, funky candy floss machines. We make everything here.
Place Cachée is where you would go to do your magical shopping, and it's also where the circus sets up shop.
The circus had a rather charming old-fashioned design.
For the circus on the street, we painted their kind of 10-foot by 12-foot banners with the creatures on, so it's circus banner artwork.
We had to build 3 tents in the end. Interior, exterior, tiny miniature tent.
We did lots of street carts and sideshows outside. We strung up festoon lights.
With all the costumes and the background eyes, filling it full of wizarding characters as well.
You don't realise the effort that goes into everybody's department. It's wondrous.
Art department is my favourite department in the whole of Leavesden. What they do is entrancing to me. The books and the papers and the posters and the letters, all of these physical, touchable objects that they make.
It's such a visual film, such a challenge to do, but that's the whole point of coming to work. We don't want to do things that are easy or things that are simple or straightforward. We want to be proud of what we're doing.
It's incredible to see Stuart Craig and his energy and the drive. For a man of his experience and years, he just inspires all of us.
And you're always learning. I mean, he's an amazing teacher.
Not with everything.
He's a bit of a Dumbledore.
He's something else. It's experience and it's knowing the best people that he brings in.
It's just this hub of expertise. Everyone there is just the best at what they do. It's amazing. You walk from department to department to department. You know, I always avoid the word magic. It's such a cliche because it's me, but it's magic. It is magical. It just is magical. There. I'm unapologetic. It's magical.
It's always inspiring to see what Stuart Craig has come up with.
When I went into the French Ministry of Magic, I said, I think this is my favourite thing you've ever built.
It's its own thing. It's not like anything we've done before.
J.K. Rowling is very precise in the stage direction. In this movie, she has specified certain places. The entrance, for example, to the French ministry is a square in Paris. It's an enjoyable part of the job, really, taking her script and following in her footsteps. She's researched it all quite diligently, yet not surprising.
It's magical Paris. It's beautiful. The elevator that takes you down, that wonderful glass interior. I love all that.
On this movie, the French ministry is a real challenge. Again, Joe specified the Art Nouveau style. We took that as an instruction and really went for it. Every inch of it is organic, twisting, curving designs.
This is my developed idea up to this final drawing, an Art Nouveau door. We're walking into the records room, which is the tree-like sculptural bookcases inside.
The records room with those amazing shelves.
It's very organic in its form. All of the balustrade is almost as if it's a grown, twisted vine working its way round the opening atrium. The main structure itself is very strong, but the actual delicacy is in the fine ceramics of the offices.
I think you can tell when you watch the movies, we really build this stuff.
The world building is always great fun, and it's kind of a given that you're going into this extraordinary universe.
When we finished it, you stood back and looked at it. It's one of those sets that's so iconic.
Bienvenue au ministère des Affaires Magiques.
Beautiful design. Even the floor, it was a conical floor. There was about £100,000 worth of steel in that floor.
The amount of detail, it helps so much to feel like I'm in this space and in the world. The sets are magnificent.
The Lestrange is emblematic in these movies of pure-blood aristocracy.
And so when Lita went to school, a lot of the other kids turned on her a little bit. So she was a real outsider.
Her journey brings her to the French ministry.
Lita Lestrange, who's from the manor born like a beautiful aristocrat, played by Zoe Kravitz, who's fantastic to dress. I was excited about setting the story in Paris because it's a beautiful city. It's known for its elegance and style. It's a little bit ahead of the fashion curve. It's got a little bit of an edge to it.
I think it's really amazing to have a film that involves magic and wizardry, but have it feel a little bit more mature.
I think each figure is about 4 weeks' work. Very high finish, because it's quite often large scale, pretty big girls, 20 foot.
If it's a one-off and it's a special piece, then I'd like to sculpt it from start to finish full size.
Quite often when sculpting in clay, going with the nail brushes and the finer tools to pull out the detail and pull out all the finer points of the sculpture.
With Stuart's designs for the French Ministry of Magic being so quintessentially Art Nouveau, we took a lot of that to then inform how we would design all the paperwork and the ephemera that would be part of that wizarding environment.
There's always new and interesting ideas. We came up with the idea of these ticker tape machines. We produced about 100 of these for the Ministry of Magic.
When you have something metal, which we're trying to copy, it's a rainbow of colours. So we go through layers of browns and ochres and golds and reds and even greens, and we start to build them up and take them back and build them up and take them back. With these, we're almost there, and it'll sell it on camera.
It's so playful and kind of poetic in its visuals. The most important thing is the audience shouldn't have to think too hard. You just need to be immersed.
I love the scale and the sort of immense experience of watching everything. It's properly immersive. He built the French Ministry of Magic in like 8 weeks. It takes some people that long to renovate their bathroom, you know?
You can literally walk in there and go into the offices. We've built it. We built the Ministry of Magic.
Magic blooms only in rare souls.
This movie deals with the rise of an autocrat. I actually had a complete idea of who he was and what his story was, even though it never appeared in the Potter books. He's a sociopath.
Join me in this circle.
Grindelwald has succeeded in an almost cult-like devotion in his followers.
Pledge to me your eternal allegiance.
However disturbing his philosophy might be, he has this ability to dress it up in a way that's digestible and consumable.
If you're not paying a lot of attention to the substance and the inherent contradictions in what he's saying, it sounds very seductive, very plausible.
Queenie, you gotta wake up.
It can persuade people that you or I might consider good people. Walk with me. Grindelwald is mentioned for the very first time in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, so he was a character who was there from the beginning. He's this mysterious background character. The crimes of Grindelwald have historically been crimes of violence and terror. However, as we meet him in this movie, we also see what a genius he is at manipulation.
There's real darkness to him, and yet he's soft-spoken about it. There's a real kind of reserve. It's quite scary.
It would be very easy to just go in and play a guy just play him evil. But one of the things that Joe and David and I talked about was no one, no matter who they are, or how horrible they are, how evil they are, they don't wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and say, I'm gonna go out and do really bad things today. No, he's doing what he believes is right at whatever cost.
Obviously, the guiding principle was where Joe started, which was he's a bit of a rock star, i.e. he's charismatic, he's beguiling, he's troubled, he's a sociopath. And so I wanted to see how witty he could be, how dangerous he could be, and how compelling and convincing he could be. And so we tried a lot of different ways of doing certain scenes. And Johnny loved all that. He loved trying things.
We try one with the sort of maybe slightly menacing tone. Despised entirely amongst wizards, unloved, mistreated, yet brave. So very brave. And then we try one so flat that it's disturbing. Brave. So very brave. Try one that's a little more manipulative. So very brave. Try one that's maybe even kind of kind. Loud, streeted, yet brave. So very brave.
We tried every which way but loose to see where he should be and land, because we were sort of figuring him out, really, as we went, as you do. So we would experiment even with a single line.
I don't like the idea of every take being the same. You should always change it up and take some risks. Even if they don't work, it's still important to take the risks, because it might.
So there are probably 3 or 4 different versions of Grindelwald in the hours of rushes that we have to the one that we ended up with.
I suppose ultimately, I thought that Grindelwald would be an exercise in stillness. I mean, the lines are important, but what's more important with Grindelwald is what's underneath the lines. It's the subtext of the lines. It's the dialogue that comes from his eyes. I have this one white eye. There's almost like a split, like a twin. And this is not anything that J.K. had written. It was just a choice that I'd made to be able to spin on a dime from the calm to the explosive, from the gentle to the brutal in a nanosecond. So needy. And so the look of Grindelwald became super important for finding the character. Putting those clothes on, you begin to stand a different way. You begin to move a different way. You reach for things in a different way. It's your suit of armor.
The Grindelwald name begged for a bit of an alpine twist. I've always loved Bavarian clothing and the punched leather and the detail embroidery, and I've always thought lederhosen was incredibly sexy. Johnny and I talked about it, and I said, I just have this idea I want to run by you, and he went for it.
I think I've worked with Colleen Atwood more than any other human being in cinema. We've ended up doing, I don't know how many films together. It seems like it's like about 18 films or something. We're super close.
We made the lederhosen a little bit longer. We coupled it with a tall boot. We had a couple Marilyn Manson conversations. You know, we went around the world. We went to a lot of places, as you do with somebody like Johnny. But we kept circling back and ended up with a slightly Bavaria meets the New Romantics.
We both sort of went for this idea almost like the Romantic poets, like Shelley and Byron. So we were sort of in that arena. And then it was all about how do we make him straight arms, straight, you know, everything absolutely perfect.
We've had a good run with this one, and no one is a more graceful kind of actor in a costume than Johnny.
The biggest challenging sequence in this film was the Grindelwald escape at night with rain and lightning and with Johnny Depp atop a carriage. That really was a sequence that had the most development through the whole prep, shoot and post period. Speaking to David Yates at the beginning of the journey of designing the sequence was to try and make it feel real, like we'd really photographed it, really got up there in the clouds. We knew that we'd have to pelt everybody with water and a lot of wind, but then every take Johnny stood there and was hosed down and was happy to sit there and did everything fantastic. We added the idea of broom riders as well. We kind of thought the idea about riders like you would have on a security detail and somebody being escorted out to New York. And I was determined that I just wanted the broom riding to look just real and not like somebody on a rig. And then Eunice came up with a great design for the stunt rig based upon what's called a tuning fork, a balancing rig. So we put a broom on it, and it meant that somebody could sit on it, and wherever they put their weight, it moved. So it just felt a bit more real. So it wasn't somebody moving them, it was them moving the rig.
We took a whole new avenue on all the broom riders, less mechanical, a lot more free.
Like sort of kick on, like just do a gesture in your shoulders as if you're ready to go.
We've advanced it now, and now we've got, well, basically they are riding brooms, it's great.
Each broom rider, we need 6 operators. You've got people lifting up and down, people actually steering it, people moving it from side to side, trying off all their tricks.
3, 2, 1, now!
Whoever's going to be riding it is going to get that real sensation of actually moving from side to side. That'll come across because you're not trying to pretend, you are actually getting to fly on a broomstick.
We had a part of the sequence that we designed where Grindelwald fills the carriage with water. So we came up with a dry for wet solution in our scanning rigs. When we photograph everybody, we do a thing what's called cross-polarizing all of our lights and all of the lenses on the cameras, which means it loses all of the reflections and any bright spots off of your face. It makes you look exactly like you do when you're underwater. And we had shot it all slow-mo, blew lots of wind at everybody, and got them to act. And there was one time when I was shooting on another unit and I walked in and Kevin Guthrie, who's Abernathy, was there in the middle of a take. And I was like, my God, he's holding his breath for a long time. And I was like, oh no, wait a minute, he's not underwater.
We knew that there was going to be some kind of rallying point, like a large-scale amphitheatre. Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris is a very famous cemetery, and we went there. It's up on a hill. It's almost like an amphitheatre of tombs around you. So Stuart took those ideas and put this amphitheatre underneath the tombs.
It's a classical amphitheatre of indeterminate age. It's in the truly classical style of ancient Rome.
Stuart doesn't do anything by heart, so when you want an amphitheatre, you get a full 4,000 capacity amphitheatre with this Pantheon-esque roof. We've got these huge ravens, like 10 foot high, holding up the roof, because the Lestrange family symbol is a raven.
The birds themselves, they were just hand sculpted, then we moulded them, and then we cast them, because they're repeats.
There's layers to it as well, countless sarcophagi and vaults and different types of tombs, and when it's full of all the extras in their full wizarding gear, it's really cool.
As a face came in, I would see something in the face that I felt could become either a businessman that's gone astray, a disheartened worker. And in the ladies, there were the groupies. At one point, David said, think of it as a rock concert. And then there were people I dressed as auras, which I had the French auras and the British auras there. So it's a really interesting combination.
Grindelwald is much smarter than Voldemort. If you disagree with Voldemort, he just kills you. It's simple as that. There's not really a discussion. With Grindelwald, if you stand up and you object to what he's saying, he'll have you on side in about 10 minutes.
Oh, and what a world we would make for all of humanity. We who live for freedom, for truth, and for love.
That's what's really terrifying about Grindelwald. And he's smart enough to understand and appreciate that you have to win hearts and minds.
It's very clear what he's talking about. However, in his delivery, he never makes himself overtly horrid.
Why were we given this strange gift? Why us? Why not them? Because they're scum! We do not use those words here, friend.
In fact, in earlier iterations of the edit, we'd show it to an audience and people kind of went, yeah, I think he's got a point. You know, the wizards are locked out and, you know, they're having a tough time. They want to be free. I get that. And we were going, oh my God, people identify with Grindelwald. This can't be right. We've got to... So we actually made him scarier.
That is the enemy. Their arrogance. Their power lust.
I like the character. I really like the character. I'm interested in people, and I think there's a lot going on in this film.
Mr. Scamander, do you think Dumbledore will mourn for you?
It was such a great experience. I'm like the luckiest man in the world to have been chosen to play Grindelwald.